She said, "I need to find out if big sighs really matters," and meant it as a dare. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe. Night had folded itself over our street like a soft blanket. Porch light hummed, washing the mailbox in a tired yellow. Inside, silence moved like a fourth person through the house, the kind of quiet you only get after the day has been measured and nothing else disturbs it. I remember exactly how she said it. We were in the kitchen, coffee cooling in our mugs, the television chuckling in the other room with nothing worth watching. Her voice was light, almost teasing, but there was a tilt to it, the kind of tilt that hides a decision. "I need to find out if big size really matters. You'll never know, don't worry." She smiled as she said it. Not cruelly, not tenderly, just practiced, like a woman testing the water before stepping in. I said, "Okay." That's what set everything in motion. For 7 years, I'd built a life that looked simple from the outside. Steady job, mortgage paid on time, Sunday dinners, the occasional fishing trip with the guys. She had warmth, laughter that turned the house soft, a way of making the ordinary feel like an event. I thought we were partners. I thought we were a team. But words are little landmines. 2 evenings later, she left for girls' night. The door shut, her heels clicked, a familiar rhythm. I made myself a sandwich, sat under the kitchen lamp, and waited for the small, private scream that follows a loud thought. It didn't come. Instead, there was a phone, left face up on the counter when she'd stepped out to take a call. Her messages lit the screen like a line of flares. "Can't wait for tonight, wink, wink. He'll never know, LOL. Bigger is always better, smirk." Each line felt like a small instrument, cartilage scraping bone. My mouth didn't move. My hands did what hands do when the mind needs proof. They reached, they tapped, they captured. I took screenshots. I copied messages into my email and sent them to myself with subject lines that read like case files. Hotel receipts, 10:08. Girls' night, texts. I wasn't thinking about drama. I was thinking about records. It felt colder than anger. Anger is quick. This was arithmetic. You learn something important when you decide to gather proof. You learn patience. You learn not to let your pulse run the show. Evidence has a steady rhythm. Emotion has a staccato. I let evidence lead. I began small and methodical, nothing theatrical. I shifted joint accounts to separate ones, rerouted automatic transfers. I'd watched her spend dreams before, heard her laugh about having options. I wanted to keep the house, the pension, the dignity we both assumed belonged to our life together. That required more planning than performance. It wasn't a night that changed everything so much as a series of small, irreversible shifts. Passwords were changed while she was at work. Automatic payments were adjusted Saturday morning when she was at a yoga class. The world, for her, moved along in its lazy orbit. For me, it was precise and relentless. We're fond of calling it the human moment when someone you love betrays you, that jolt where blood forgets its name. My jolt was soft. Initially, the pain was a white-hot brand in my chest. Then it cooled. The cooling is worse, because it lets thought in. Thought says, "What now?" Thought weighs options. It tastes them. And then anger becomes a quieter thing, resolve. Some will say that's revenge. Others will call it justice. I call it a man rearranging the pieces of his life in the only way left to him, with his hands. There was a list in my notebook: evidence, finances, timing. The notebook looked ordinary, a cheap spiral with coffee stains. But on the inside, neat bullet points, timestamps, copies of receipts. I had more than messages. Hotel reservations, a mysterious debit card charge for 2 at a roadside motel at 2:13 a.m., photos of license plates. I didn't share any of it. Not yet. I made 2 phone calls that night. One to a lawyer, one to an old friend who owed me more than a favor. The lawyer's voice was businesslike, which is what I wanted. The friend was the one who knew how to get someone to show up at the right moment. Nothing illegal, just strategic timing. He agreed to be at the house at 9, no questions asked. The clock reads 8:45 p.m. The living room is immaculately arranged, lights low. I stand at the window, palms pressed to the glass, making small circles in the condensation, as if I had a model of the next hour mapped out there. Everyone imagines that when the truth comes out, it explodes. They picture shouting matches, smashed plates, neighbors peeking through blinds. But the best dramas are quieter. They are the ones that happen inside a room with the light dimmed and the paper thin between dignity and spectacle. She came back around 10. Her hair was a white hurricane of a girl's night, lipstick smudged just a little at the corner, as if she'd been laughing too hard. She moved like she owned the night. The front door opened, and she expected the same warm home she'd always known. The lock turned, the door opened, and for the first time, something in her face changed. She froze the way a deer might. For a single long second, I watched every calculation she'd made in her head on spool. She saw him before she recognized him. There was a man in my living room who didn't belong to our usual script. He wasn't the other man. He wasn't the stranger from her texts. He was the one woman in her life who carried a different kind of power. Her father. Care to explain?
She swallowed. Lipstick mouth parted. A small, shocked sound that had no words after it. For a moment, she tried for a smile, the practiced salvage of someone who wants to walk backward out of a mistake, and failed. I didn't want to scream. I didn't want to beg. I wanted the truth to be a thing with a doorbell and a stamp on it. So I had sent him copies of everything earlier that day, screenshots, receipts, names, times. I had written him a letter in plain language. "You deserve to know," I'd typed, the cursor blinking like a guilty heartbeat. He had come, and he came with the look of a man whose respect had been weighed and found wanting. The father drops an envelope on the coffee table. The sound is loud in the hush. Papers flutter. Close-up on the woman's face. Mascara trails like the running of ink on a page that tells a story you didn't want read aloud. The look of being seen honestly and without mercy is its own kind of punishment. It is the moment when someone you hoped to impress looks at you and decides your reasons won't wash. Her friendships frayed fast. People who had been at her side the month before now asked questions that began kindly and ended in thin distance. Her father stopped answering her calls. Small business favors she leaned on were quietly withdrawn. At first, it was a social ripple. Then, it became a tide. But this is not a tale merely about punishment. It's about what quiet, steady choices do to the map of a life. I walked away with more than money. I walked away with the knowledge that I had acted in keeping with the values I had cultivated. Dignity, patience, prudence. Those values had weight. They had size. Not the size she meant. She thought she was testing the size of something physical. She was wrong. What she was about to learn, and I mean truly learn, was how large patience can be, how wide silence can stretch, and how a measured response can eclipse a momentary thrill. And the consequences of that discovery would arrive in ways she could not yet imagine. The next part of this story is where the real cost becomes visible, not in gossip or whispers, but in how we pick up the pieces and carry them forward. In part 2, you'll see the aftermath, the legal moves, the social fallout, and a reckoning that doesn't just sting, it reshapes.
Before we continue, make sure to subscribe. The morning after the confrontation, the house felt different. Quiet, yes, but not the calm of routine. the kind of quiet that carries the weight of unspoken truths. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, cutting lines across the floor, but the warmth didn't reach the spaces where trust had once lived. I poured a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table. The envelope her father had left the night before was still there, unopened by me, because I didn't need to touch it. Its presence alone was enough, a tangible reminder that the truth had been seen, recorded, and measured. Her absence was immediate. She didn't return the night before, and she wouldn't return until much later, if at all. The neighborhood murmured with curiosity, a few friends casting side glances as they walked by. Some recognized the look on her face from the day before, that mixture of fear and disbelief. The whispers didn't matter to me. What mattered was control. The map of my life was no longer negotiable. Days passed, each carrying the slow weight of consequences. Legal papers arrived, divorce filings prepared and executed with precision. Every line was calculated to protect what was mine, to ensure she couldn't manipulate or delay the inevitable. I watched from a distance, letting the process unfold as a silent observer, knowing that every detail was anchored in the facts I had so meticulously gathered. The first real confrontation after that night was with her friends, the ones who once envied our life, the ones who had laughed at the thought of loyalty. Their surprise when they saw her alone, stripped of her usual confidence, was almost poetic. A few whispered questions, hesitant glances, subtle distancing. The network she had relied on for social validation was fraying, strand by strand. But the most profound shift was internal. It wasn't just about losing her, or even the betrayal. It was about reclaiming myself. Every decision I had made, every step I had taken, reinforced a truth I had always known. Strength isn't shown in anger or spectacle. Strength is quiet. Strength is calculated. Strength survives the betrayal and emerges unbroken. I began organizing my life for the first time in years, not around her whims or social appearances, but around stability, dignity, and clarity. I updated the home's security, separated accounts fully, and started planning financial steps that secured not just the present, but the future. This wasn't revenge for revenge's sake. It was preparation, a demonstration of what patience and foresight could achieve when the other party underestimated you. Weeks later, the social repercussions became unavoidable. Mutual friends approached cautiously, asking questions in hushed tones, trying to reconcile the image they once had for her with the reality that was now visible. Her father had made it clear. He would not intervene financially or socially, leaving her to navigate a life she had recklessly fractured. And she did, stumbling through invitations that no longer carried the weight of influence, realizing too late that respect, once lost, is almost impossible to reclaim. Scene: interior, living room, midday light filtering in. I sit with a planner, coffee in hand, reviewing the past weeks like a strategist mapping a battlefield. Phone notifications ping softly. None are hers, none need to be. I remember the last message she sent after the fallout. Brief, polite, almost sterile. I understand. Nothing more. No explanation, no pleading, no attempt to rewrite history. Just understanding. That one word confirmed the slow collapse I had orchestrated, the methodical unraveling of the illusion she had relied on. Yet, even in the absence of her drama, life wasn't entirely void of reflection. There were moments of memory, 7 years distilled into flashes, late-night talks, shared vacations, the comfort of quiet routines. Those memories were neither poison nor balm. They were evidence that love, once genuine, is not easily replaced by betrayal. But they also reminded me why patience, careful planning, and the quiet assertion of one's boundaries are crucial. I focused on building forward, new projects, hobbies, friends who respected boundaries. Life continued, each choice deliberate. And slowly, the sense of control that had been threatened returned. I wasn't just surviving the aftermath, I was thriving in the clarity it provided. Scene: exterior, backyard, evening. Sunset spills gold across the grass. I sit on the patio, a journal in hand, pen poised. I write down lessons from this ordeal, not for anyone else, but to anchor my own understanding. Loyalty is not a guarantee. Trust must be earned and respected. Silence and patience can be more powerful than immediate retribution. Her story became a quiet, cautionary tale. Friends and acquaintances shared versions of the events, carefully edited, whispers that carried lessons about overconfidence, impulsive choices, and the danger of underestimating the people we take for granted. The man she had tried to deceive had not only survived, he had grown stronger, not in anger, but in wisdom and measured action. Dialogue, brief recollection. Father, calm, firm. You have to face the consequences of your choices. Her, I didn't think it would. Father, you thought wrong, and now you live with the result.
I watched this from my vantage point, knowing she would carry the weight of that understanding for years. The people we think are untouchable often find the quietest lessons the most enduring. Weeks turned to months. I rebuilt routines, reinforced personal boundaries, and refocused energy on what mattered: integrity, patience, and the future. Socially, financially, emotionally, I had reclaimed what she had taken for granted. One evening, I realized something essential. Revenge isn't about rage. It's about control. It's about steering a life, quietly but deliberately, to a place where truth and consequence converge. And that I had done. Scene: interior, study, night. Desk lamp casts soft light. I closed the journal, set the pen down, and leaned back. A deep breath. Relief. Not triumphal, not gloating, just clarity. The house is mine, the finances secure, and the path ahead is clear. Her thrill-seeking curiosity about size had led her to underestimate the quiet power of a man who had patience, foresight, and resolve. In the end, it wasn't about size at all. It was about depth, strength, and the discipline to act when provoked. That lesson, once invisible, was now unavoidable. As I walked through the house that evening, the air felt lighter. The silence was no longer weighted with suspicion, but filled with possibility. Life continued, unshaken, deliberate, and honest. And the clarity I had gained, that was the real size that mattered.